Betrayal has a sound. It isn't a scream. It isn't a slammed door. It's a vibration. A relentless, persistent hum against the floorboards at 3:14 a.m. Dominic Wallace didn't wake up. He activated. His eyes snapped open in the dark, his mind instantly sharpening from sleep to lethal clarity. Beside him lay Candace, 23, drop-dead gorgeous, and sleeping like a baby. The baby, the miracle heir, she had wept over yesterday while holding a positive pregnancy test. She looked like an angel wrapped in 1,000 thread count Egyptian cotton. But angels don't shove their phones under the bed frame like contraband. Dominic's hand moved like a viper. Fast, silent, deadly. He reached into the dust and pulled out the device. The screen flared up, slicing through the darkness. One notification. Coach Z. The preview text hit him like a physical slap. He still thinks the baby is his. We need to talk before the scan. Boom. In 1 second, the life Dominic built, the legacy, the love, the future, vaporized. He wasn't a father-to-be. He was a paycheck. He was the retirement plan for a bottle girl and her gym rat boyfriend. Does your stomach hurt yet? It should. Because right now, while you're listening to this, someone you trust is lying to you. Maybe it's small. Maybe it's big. Or maybe, like Dominic, you're sleeping next to a stranger holding a dagger. Welcome to Twisted Love Tales. We don't do happily ever after here. We do the ugly, messy truth. If you want to learn how to spot a liar before they ruin you, you need to be part of the True Hearts. Smash that subscribe button, like this video right now, to lock in your loyalty. Do it before you check your partner's phone. Dominic didn't gasp. He didn't cry. A weaker man would have shaken her awake, screaming, begging for an explanation. But Dominic Wallace didn't become a logistics tycoon by throwing tantrums. He became one by burying his enemies. He stared at Candace's sleeping face. A moment ago, he saw his wife. Now, he saw a parasite, a beautiful, blood-sucking parasite attached to his wallet. He looked back at the text. He still thinks the baby is his. A cold, terrifying grin split Dominic's face. It wasn't a smile. It was a baring of teeth. Because Candace and Coach Z had made a fatal miscalculation. They had planned the perfect crime, but they forgot to check the victim's medical file. They didn't know about Zurich. They didn't know that 10 years ago, Dominic walked into a private clinic and had his tubes tied, burned, and buried. Dominic was sterile. He wasn't the victim here. They were. They had just walked into a lion's den wearing meat suits. Dominic slid the phone back under the bed, precise to the millimeter. He rolled over, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of his own heartbeat. It was steady, calm, dangerous. He wasn't going to leave her. No, that was too easy. He was going to stay. He was going to play the doting father. He was going to buy the cribs, pay for the nursery, and hold her hand at the appointments. He was going to let them think they had won the lottery. And then, when the pot was big enough, he was going to take it all. The smell of caramelized bacon and fresh espresso filled the kitchen. Dominic was already dressed in a charcoal three-piece suit, reading the Wall Street Journal on his tablet. When Candace walked in, wrapped in a silk robe that cost more than most people's cars, Dominic didn't just look at her. He studied her. She was undeniably stunning, a woman who had mastered the art of appearance. But now Dominic saw the cracks in the porcelain. He saw the slight tremor in her hand as she poured her water. He saw the way her eyes darted to her phone every few seconds. "Good morning, beautiful," Dominic said, his voice smooth, betraying nothing. He stood up, walking over to her. He didn't kiss her lips. Instead, he dropped to one knee, pressing his ear against her flat stomach. Candace stiffened. Dominic felt her abdominal muscles contract sharply against his cheek. "I know it's early," Dominic whispered into her skin, looking up at her with eyes full of fabricated adoration. "But I swear I can feel him. A strong air. A Wallace man." Candace forced a laugh, running her fingers through his hair. "Dom, baby, it's been like 3 weeks. You can't feel anything yet." "I can," Dominic lied, standing up and gripping her waist. "And I've been thinking, if I'm going to be an older dad, I need to be ready. I can't be the old guy in the pickup line wheezing after playing catch. I need to get back in the gym." Panic flashed in Candace's eyes, quick and sharp. "The gym? But you're so busy with the merger. I made time, Dominic smiled. In fact, I cleared my morning. I want to come with you today. I want to meet this Coach Z. If he's the one responsible for looking after the mother of my child, I need to shake his hand. Candace opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. She couldn't say no without looking suspicious. Okay, she stammered, her smile tight, but Zeke is intense. He's not used to clients like you. Perfect, Dominic said. I love a challenge. An hour later, they walked into Iron Paradise, an elite, invite-only gym in the heart of the city. The air smelled of sweat and expensive cologne. And there he was, Zeke Winfield. Zeke was 28, built like a linebacker, with the kind of arrogant swagger that comes from never having heard the word no. He was wearing a tight compression shirt that showed off every muscle, laughing loudly with a receptionist. He was the physical opposite of Dominic. Where Dominic was tailored suits and calculated silence, Zeke was neon Nikes and loud bravado. When Zeke saw Candace, his eyes lit up with a familiarity that made Dominic's stomach turn. But then he saw Dominic standing behind her, and the light dimmed into confusion. Coach Z, Dominic boomed, extending a hand. I've heard so much about you. Zeke wiped his palm on his shorts and took the hand. Dominic gripped it hard. He felt the younger man's bones shift slightly under the pressure. It was a subtle, primitive warning. Mr. Wallace, Zeke said, trying to pull his hand back. But Dominic held on for a second too long. I didn't know you trained. I'm starting today, Dominic said, his eyes locking onto Zeke's with a predator's intensity. My wife tells me you're the best. She says you really know how to push her limits. Zeke swallowed hard, glancing nervously at Candace. I just do my job, sir. Good. Dominic released his hand, flashing a terrifyingly friendly smile. Because I want to hire you. Triple your rate. Exclusive access. I want you to come to the house. Train both of us. We're going to be a family, Zeke. I want us all to be close. Dominic watched the color drain from Zeke's face. The trap was set. The mouse had just been invited into the lion's den. The first training session at the penthouse wasn't a workout. It was a psychological experiment. Zeke arrived carrying a duffel bag that looked cheap against the Italian marble of Dominic's foyer. He looked around with wide, hungry eyes. Dominic saw it immediately, the greed. Zeke wasn't just attracted to Candace. He was attracted to the lifestyle Dominic provided. He was casing the joint, imagining what it would be like to live here once the old man was out of the picture. Let's get to work, Dominic said, waiting in the home gym. For an hour, Dominic watched. He watched Zeke guide Candace through squats, his hands lingering on her hips a fraction of a second too long. He watched the subtle, terrified glances they exchanged whenever Dominic turned his back to grab a towel. It was sickening, a silent dance of betrayal happening right in his own sanctuary. But Dominic didn't snap. He did push-ups until his arms burned, channeling his rage into the floor, fueling the discipline he would need for what came next. When the session ended, Candace went to shower, leaving the two men alone. The air was thick with testosterone and unsaid threats. Zeke reached for his water bottle, his hand shaking slightly. You have a great setup here, Mr. Wallace, Zeke said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Must be nice. It is, Dominic said, walking over to a small safe in the wall. He punched in the code and pulled out a thick leather folder. But legacy isn't about what you have, Zeke. It's about what you leave behind. Which brings me to why I really hired you. Zeke stiffened. Sir. Dominic tossed the folder onto the bench press. Candace tells me you have a dream. You want to open your own franchise. Iron Empire? Isn't that it? Zeke's jaw dropped. Yeah. How did you? I know everything my wife knows, Dominic lied smoothly. And since you're helping me prepare for fatherhood, I want to help you. In that folder is a loan agreement. $200,000. Seed money. Interest-free for the first year. Zeke looked at the folder like it was a bomb, then like it was a bar of gold. He opened it, his eyes scanning the numbers. He was seeing dollar signs, not the fine print. I don't know what to say, Zeke stammered. Say yes, Dominic said, stepping closer, his voice dropping an octave. But there's a condition. To make it official, I need collateral. The contract puts a lien on your current assets, your car, your apartment, your savings. Standard business practice. It just ensures that you don't run away. It was a deal with the devil. If Zeke signed, he got the money, but Dominic would own him. If Zeke messed up, if the truth came out, Dominic could legally strip him of everything he owned before he even woke up in the morning. Zeke looked at the bathroom door where Candace was, then back at the money. Greed won. It always did. Where do I sign? Zeke asked, grabbing a pen. Dominic watched the ink dry on the page. The trap was sprung. Zeke wasn't just the other man anymore. He was an employee, a debtor, a subordinate. Welcome to the family, Zeke, Dominic said, taking the folder back. Now go get cleaned up. We have a doctor's appointment next week. I want you to come with us. To the ultrasound? Zeke asked, panic flaring again. Of course, Dominic smiled, his eyes cold as glass. I want the whole team there when we see my baby for the first time. The waiting room of Dr. Evans' private clinic was silent, save for the aggressive ticking of a wall clock. To Candace and Zeke, it sounded like a countdown. Dominic sat between them, flipping through a brochure on cord blood banking, looking entirely too comfortable. He had insisted Zeke come along for moral support, framing it as part of Zeke's duties as the family's wellness coach. In reality, Dominic just wanted to see if Zeke would vomit. You look pale, Zeke, Dominic noted, not looking up from the brochure. You need to hydrate. Can't have you passing out when we see the little guy. Zeke shifted in his chair, wiping sweaty palms on his jeans. I'm good, Mr. Wallace. Just, hospitals make me nervous. It's not a hospital. It's a beginning, Dominic said, closing the magazine. Dr. Evans has been the Wallace family physician for 30 years. He delivered me. He knows my DNA better than I do. At the mention of DNA, Candace flinched. She quickly covered it by reaching for her purse, but Dominic caught the micro-movement. She was terrified. Dominic Wallace? The nurse called out. The room was dim. The ultrasound machine hummed with a low, electric pitch that reminded Dominic of the vibration of the phone under the bed. Candace lay on the paper-covered table, her shirt pulled up. Dominic stood on her right, gripping her hand. Zeke stood awkwardly in the corner, trying to make himself invisible. Dr. Evans, a silver-haired man with a kind face, squirted the cold blue gel onto Candace's stomach. She shivered. All right, let's take a look at the air. Dr. Evans smiled. He moved the wand. Static filled the room, followed by a rhythmic, watery whoosh whoosh whoosh. The heartbeat. There it is, Dr. Evans said. Strong. Fast. Perfectly healthy. Dominic squeezed Candace's hand. He squeezed it hard enough that her knuckles popped. Listen to that, he whispered, staring at the monitor. At the grain of rice that was ruining his life. That's the sound of the future. He turned to Zeke. Come look, Zeke. Come see what a strong bloodline looks like. Zeke shuffled forward, forced to look at the screen. He was looking at his own child, but he couldn't claim it. He had to stand there and watch another man claim his biology. The torture was exquisite. Based on the measurements, Dr. Evans mumbled, typing on the keyboard, I'd put you at 10 weeks and 4 days. Dominic did the mental math instantly. 10 weeks ago, he was in Tokyo closing the Pacific merger. He hadn't even been in the country. He looked at Candace. She wasn't breathing. 10 weeks, Dominic repeated slowly, letting the silence stretch until it was suffocating. That would be the weekend I got back from Japan. Remember, honey, the night I was so exhausted. He gave her an out. He handed her the lie on a silver platter. Candace exhaled, a desperate, shaky breath. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I remember. Must have been a miracle night, Dominic said, turning his gaze to Zeke. Some things are just meant to be. Nature finds a way. Right, coach? Zeke nodded dumbly. Right? Actually, Dominic said, his voice brightening with a new, dangerous idea. Since we are all here, Dr. Evans, I want to schedule a chromosomal panel. An IPT testing. I read it can detect genetic issues early. I want to make sure the baby doesn't inherit anything unexpected. Candace's eyes went wide. Is that necessary, Dom? It's expensive and Money is no object. Dominic cut her off, his voice final. I want to know exactly what this baby is made of. Book it. Document. As they left the clinic, the noose tightened. The test would reveal the gender, but more importantly, it was one step closer to the paternity truth. Dominic watched Candace in the rearview mirror. She was texting. He didn't need to see the screen to know she was telling Zeke to panic. Dinner at the Wallace penthouse was usually a quiet affair. But tonight, the silence was loud enough to break glass. Dominic sat at the head of the long obsidian table. Candace sat to his right. Zeke, the family friend and employee, sat to his left. The air conditioning was set to a cool 68 degrees, yet beads of sweat were visible on Zeke's temples. Dominic swirled his Cabernet, watching the red liquid coat the glass. He had the NIPT genetic test results in his email inbox. He hadn't opened them yet. He didn't need to. He knew the biology, but he needed them to believe that the walls were closing in. The lab emailed me today, Dominic said casually, slicing into his medium-rare steak. The knife scraped against the porcelain plate. Screech. Candace dropped her fork. The results? Already?
Fast-tracked, Dominic smiled.
Technology is amazing, isn't it, Zeke? Zeke choked on his water. Yeah, amazing. I haven't opened the file yet, Dominic continued, leaning back. I wanted to wait, but there is something I haven't told you both. Something about the Wallace bloodline. He paused, letting the tension build until it was suffocating. There's a specific genetic marker. It's rare, dominant. Every male in my family for 4 generations has had it. It's a minor blood anomaly, harmless, but distinct. This was a lie, a complete fabrication. But Dominic delivered it with the conviction of a man stating the time of day. If this baby is a Wallace, Dominic said, locking eyes with Candace, he will have that marker. It's a biological certainty. If he doesn't, well, then we have a medical mystery. Or a mistake. Candace's face went ash-gray. She looked at Zeke. They both knew the truth. The baby was Zeke's, which meant the baby would not have this made-up marker. In their minds, Dominic had just confirmed that on Friday. When he opened that file, he would know with 100% scientific certainty that the child wasn't his. Stop. Look at their faces in your mind. That is the look of absolute terror. That is the look of a lie running out of road. Most people think cheating is a game they can win if they're just careful enough. But true hearts, tell me, how do you outsmart a man who is 3 steps ahead of you? Do you think they'll confess? Or are they going to try something desperate? If you're loving this psychological chess match, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't be a spectator, join the winning side. And drop a comment below. What would you do if you were Zeke right now? Run or fight? Anyway, Dominic took a sip of wine, masking his amusement. I'm opening the results on Friday, at the gender reveal party. I want it to be a surprise for everyone, including me. He had given them a deadline. Friday, 3 days away. Zeke, Dominic said, shifting gears instantly. How is the gym build-out coming? You spend that 200 grand yet? Zeke blinked, pulling himself out of his panic. Yeah. Equipment is ordered. Lease is signed. Good. Dominic nodded. Because if you backed out now, the penalty clauses in that contract would be severe. You'd lose everything. But I know you're a man of your word. Dominic stood up, buttoning his jacket. I have some calls to make. Enjoy dessert. The creme brulee is excellent. It's sweet, but there's a bitterness underneath if you burn it. He walked out of the room, leaving them alone at the table. He paused just outside the door, listening. He's going to know, Zeke whispered, his voice frantic. Candace, on Friday, he's going to know the baby doesn't have the marker. We're dead. We have to do something, Candace hissed back. We can't let him open those results. Dominic smiled in the hallway. They were desperate, and desperate people make fatal mistakes. Thursday night, 24 hours before the gender reveal party. The air in the penthouse was heavy, charged with the static of unspoken crimes. Dominic sat in his home office, the glow of 6 security monitors illuminating his face in the dark. He wasn't working on the merger. He was watching a live feed of his own hallway. He had told Candace he was going out for a cigar at the private club. He had made a show of grabbing his coat, kissing her on the cheek, and leaving his laptop, the one containing the party presentation, sitting on his mahogany desk. He hadn't gone to the club. He was sitting in his car in the parking garage, watching the feed on his iPad. "Show me," Dominic whispered to the screen. "Show me who you really are." At 9:15 p.m., the office door creaked open. Candace entered first. She was wearing her silk pajamas, looking over her shoulder, terrified. She hissed into the hallway. "Hurry up. The security system is on a loop for 10 minutes. I disabled it." Zeke stepped into the frame. He was wearing a hoodie, hood up, looking like a common burglar in a $10 million home. "Which computer?" Zeke whispered, his voice tinny through the hidden microphone. "That one." Candace pointed to the main MacBook Pro. "The file is on the desktop. It's labeled Friday_reveal_final. You have the fake drive." "Yeah." Zeke patted his pocket. "My cousin photoshopped the PDF. It says 99.9% match for Dominic Wallace and no genetic anomalies. It looks real, Candace. It's perfect." Dominic, sitting in the dark of his car, felt a cold weight settle in his chest. This was the darkest hour. Until this moment, a tiny, foolish part of him had hoped they would come clean. He had hoped Candace would break down and confess. But watching them now, conspiring to plant forged medical documents to trick him into raising another man's child. The last ember of love he held for his wife was extinguished. He watched Zeke plug a USB drive into the laptop. He watched his wife type in the password, his birthday. He watched them drag the real file to the trash and replace it with the fake one. "Done," Zeke exhaled, pulling the drive out. "He's going to open this tomorrow, see the fake match, and we're safe. We're safe, baby." Zeke grabbed Candace and kissed her. It was a desperate, adrenaline-fueled kiss right there in Dominic's sanctuary. "Get out!" Candace pushed him away, wiping her mouth. "He'll be back soon." They scrambled out of the room, closing the door. In the garage, Dominic turned off the iPad. He didn't feel anger anymore. He felt a profound, hollow clarity. They had just dug their own graves. They thought they had swapped the file. They thought they were in control. But Dominic Wallace was an IT infrastructure specialist before he was a CEO. He had remote access to that laptop. He had seen the file swap, and with a single tap on his phone, he reverted the desktop to its previous state, restoring the original damning presentation. He started the engine of his Rolls-Royce. The vibration purred through the seat. "You want a show?" Dominic said to the rearview mirror. "I'll give you a show." He drove back up the ramp. He walked into the penthouse 10 minutes later, smelling of cigar smoke he hadn't smoked. Candace was on the couch, reading a magazine, feigning relaxation. "Have a good night, honey?" she asked, her voice high and brittle. "The best?" Dominic smiled, leaning down to kiss her forehead. He tasted the fear on her skin. "I feel very optimistic about tomorrow. I think everything is going to go exactly according to plan." Friday afternoon arrived with the scent of fresh lilies and expensive perfume. The rooftop terrace of the Wallace penthouse had been transformed into a pastel wonderland. 500 blue and pink balloons formed an archway over the stage. A jazz quartet played soft, non-threatening music in the corner. It was a perfect setting for a celebration, or a massacre. Dominic stood in front of his floor-to-ceiling mirror, adjusting his silk tie. He looked at his reflection. He didn't see a heartbroken husband. He saw a man who had survived the night. The hesitation was gone. The grief was gone. All that was left was the cold precision of a CEO executing a hostile takeover. Candace walked in behind him, zipping up her white maternity gown. For the first time in a week, she looked genuinely happy. The terror that had haunted her eyes was replaced by a smug, relaxed brightness. She walked over and hugged Dominic from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. "You look handsome, Dom," she purred. "Today is going to be perfect. I can feel it." "It certainly will be," Dominic replied, watching her reflection. He saw the relief in her face. She really believed their little midnight heist had worked. She thought the USB drive in the laptop downstairs contained the forged documents that would secure her future. "Zeke is here," she added casually. "He's helping the caterers set up." "Good man," Dominic said. "I should go thank him." Dominic walked out onto the terrace. Zeke was standing by the bar, laughing with a waiter, looking entirely too comfortable in a suit Dominic knew he hadn't paid for. When Zeke saw Dominic, he didn't flinch like before. He grinned. It was the grin of a man who thought he had gotten away with murder. "Mr. Wallace," Zeke called out, raising a glass of sparkling water. "Big day." "The biggest," Dominic agreed, walking over. He placed a heavy hand on Zeke's shoulder. "I want you to know, Zeke, I appreciate everything you've done. Stepfathers usually don't get enough credit. But in this house, everyone gets what they deserve." Zeke laughed, missing the subtext entirely. "Just doing my job, boss." Dominic walked past him toward the AV booth. The technician, a young guy named Marcus, not that Marcus, just a tech, was queuing up the presentation on the massive LED wall. "Mr. Wallace," the tech said, "I have the file ready. The one from the desktop." Dominic leaned in. This was the moment. He could stop it. He could choose mercy. He could cancel the party, divorce Candace quietly, and let them fade into obscurity. But he looked back at the bar. He saw Zeke whispering something to Candace. He saw Candace giggle and touch Zeke's arm. They were mocking him in his own home. "Yes," Dominic said, his voice hard as granite. "But not the one on the desktop. I uploaded a cloud backup 5 minutes ago. File name, _truth_v final. Use that one." The tech nodded, oblivious. "You got it, sir." Dominic turned back to the crowd. Guests were starting to arrive, business partners, socialites, family members. They were all smiling, bringing gifts, ready to celebrate a lie. Dominic took a deep breath of the cool evening air. The trap wasn't just set. It was armed. He wasn't just going to expose them. He was going to ensure that by the time the sun set, neither Candace nor Zeke would be able to show their faces in this city again. Dominic grabbed a microphone from the stand. The feedback whine silenced the crowd. "Welcome, everyone," Dominic boomed, a dazzling, fake smile plastering his face. "Please grab a drink. We're starting in 10 minutes. He locked eyes with Candace across the room. She raised her glass to him. He raised his back. Cheers to the end of the world. The sun had set, leaving the rooftop bathed in the artificial glow of amber string lights and the massive LED screen that stood dark and imposing behind the stage. Dominic tapped the microphone. Thump, thump. A sound like a heavy heartbeat echoing through the speakers. The chatter of 200 guests died down instantly. "Thank you all for coming," Dominic said, his voice rich and commanding. "Tonight is about truth. It's about the future." He gestured to the side. "Candace, my beautiful wife, please come join me." Candace glided up the stairs, beaming, clutching her belly. She squeezed Dominic's hand, confident that the USB drive in the booth contained the forged 99.9% match document. And, Dominic added, his eyes scanning the front row, "Zeke, come up here. You've been instrumental in this journey. You're practically family." A ripple of confusion went through the crowd, but Zeke, emboldened by the champagne and his arrogance, jogged up the steps. He stood next to Candace, flashing a winning smile at the audience. "Before we reveal the gender," Dominic said, turning to face the couple, "I want to talk about biology. A few days ago, I told my wife and Zeke here that the Wallace bloodline carries a specific genetic marker. I told them that if this baby was mine, it would have that marker." Candace nodded vigorously, playing along, waiting for the fake proof. Dominic's smile vanished. The temperature on the stage seemed to drop 20 degrees. "I lied," Dominic said. The silence was absolute. A champagne glass clinked somewhere in the back. "There is no genetic marker," Dominic continued, his voice dropping to a conversational, deadly volume. "But there is a medical history. You see, while you two were busy planning how to spend my money, you forgot to check my medical records from 2015. Specifically, the record of my vasectomy." Candace froze. It wasn't a slow realization. It was a collision. Her face drained of color so fast she looked like a corpse. Zeke took a step back, nearly tripping over a monitor wedge. "I am sterile," Dominic announced to the crowd. "I have been for 10 years. A collective gasp ripped through the audience. Candace's mother covered her mouth in the front row. "So, Dominic turned to the tech booth. If I can't be the father, who is? Marcus. Hit it. The massive LED screen didn't explode with pink or blue fireworks. Instead, it lit up with a high-definition screenshot. It was the text message, blown up to 20 feet tall. He still thinks the baby is his. We need to plan before the doctor's appointment. Then the next slide. A photo of Zeke and Candace in the gym locker room, intimately entangled, time-stamped 3 months ago. Then the next. A bank transfer from Candace to Zeke labeled, rent. Candace let out a guttural sob, burying her face in her hands. The crowd erupted shouts, gasps, phones raised to record the wreckage. Zeke looked for an exit, his eyes darting to the stairwell. Don't run, Zeke. Dominic's voice boomed over the chaos. You can't afford to run. Remember that loan agreement you signed? The one for the gym equipment. Dominic pulled a paper from his jacket pocket. It contains a character clause. In the event of criminal misconduct or fraud against the lender, that's me, the loan is called in immediately.
Plus penalty.
You owe me $200,000 as of right now. Zeke stopped. He looked at Dominic, then at the angry security guards blocking the exit. He was ruined. Dominic looked at Candace, who was weeping on the floor of the stage. And you, my dear, the prenup is ironclad. You leave with what you came with, which, if I remember correctly, was absolutely nothing. Dominic dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a deafening screech that signaled the end of the show. He didn't look back. He walked down the center stairs, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea, leaving the two traitors alone under the harsh light of their own sins. Dominic stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the lobby. As the brushed steel doors slid shut, they cut off the sound of Candace's weeping and the shocked murmurs of the crowd. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with relief. Dominic loosened his silk tie, watching the floor numbers descend. He didn't feel the crushing weight of a broken heart. He felt the lightness of a man who had just cut out a tumor. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in ruthless efficiency. Dominic's legal team descended on the wreckage of his marriage like a swarm of locusts. The prenuptial agreement held firm, it was ironclad. Candace was escorted out of the penthouse by security, clutching 2 suitcases filled with clothes she could no longer afford to dry clean. There was no alimony, no settlement, no goodbyequis. She moved back into her mother's cramped apartment, trading her view of the skyline for a view of a brick wall. Zeke fared far worse. The loan contract was enforceable. Dominic didn't just want his money back, he wanted a lesson taught. He seized Zeke's leased sports car, froze his savings account, and placed a lien on his future wages. The dream of Iron Empire died before it took its first breath. Zeke was back to spotting weights at a budget gym for minimum wage, looking over his shoulder every day, knowing he owed a debt to a man who never forgot. 1 month later, Dominic stood on the same rooftop terrace where he had exposed them. The balloons and the stage were gone. It was just him, the cool night wind, and a glass of 1942 Don Julio. He walked to the edge, looking out at the city lights. He realized he had been trying to force a legacy. He had tried to buy a future with a woman who was only renting space in his life. He had ignored the red flags because he wanted the dream so badly. But now, standing alone in his empire, he realized that peace was more valuable than a picture-perfect lie. He took a sip of the tequila. It burned, clean and sharp. He was 43. He was healthy. He was wealthier than ever. And most importantly, he was awake. And that true hearts is how you clean house. Dominic didn't just survive the betrayal, he monetized it. He turned their trap into his triumph. Now I have a question for you. If you were Dominic, would you have been that ruthless? Or would you have shown mercy? Let me know in the comments below. If the story kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button, subscribe to Twisted Love Tales, and turn on notifications. We have darker, crazier stories coming next week. Remember, the truth is always there. Sometimes you just have to look under the bed. Dominic turned his back on the view and walked toward the penthouse doors. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and opened his contacts. He scrolled to wife, hit edit, and then delete contact. Alexa, he said to the empty, peaceful room. Play some jazz. The music started, smooth and soulful. The night was young, the house was clean, and the king was back on his throne. The end.